if you ask me a question, you always get a story. And the story is very simple. The day we were liberated, we were sleeping, in the Hamburger Kaserne in Theresienstadt, and the Russian army, it was the 8th of May, 1945, and we were kind of suddenly, we were woken up, and everybody shouted, "We are free, we are free, we are free." And fortunately, I still had quite a bit of strength in me after the death march because I worked in the SS kitchen in Colditz, before we went on the death march. So we started running away, running out through the gate because the Czech gendarmes that used to collaborate or cooperate with the Nazis, they disappeared and everybody else disappeared. And we were just running out, and suddenly we saw these Russian infantry walking. There were maybe a couple of tanks, but mainly it was just they were walking, and they had boots, kind of open, high boots open, and they had tobacco on one side, food on the other, a bandolier with a gun and a blanket, and they were like self-sufficient. They had food in one side of the boot and majorca, tobacco on the other side. And it was very fascinating because we were all youngsters that we ran out. I suppose the elderly people, were so schwach, they were so weak, they couldn't kind of go out. And we saw these Czechs chasing out the Germans that were settled, by Hitler, when he took over Bohemia and Moravia. So he chased all the ethnic cleansing, took out all the Czechs and Slovaks or whatever people that lived there and settled it with Germans. Now it was the other way around. They were chasing them out. And we saw women with children, with infants, with prams, shouting and being unhappy and being and I didn't know what was going on, but the Russians used to grab young women and take them to kind of the forest to the side, and I had no idea what was going on, and we felt sorry for them. Can you imagine after 5 years? And 6 concentration camps and a death camp where I lost my whole immediate family, my father, mother, and sister. I felt sorry for them because when you see people suffering, you feel sorry. And then something marvelous happened. I saw a wagon with 2 horses, spanned in, and they were standing in a field. And because my maternal grandfather was a farmer, I was very familiar with animals and with horses particularly. I loved horses. So I ran up just to play with them, I kind of to smell them, to hug them and to do, I mean, it was to me it was great fun. I loved horses. So I went and I kind of played with them and I was waiting for the owner to come. And I waited half an hour, maybe more than a half hour. I didn't know how long it was, but nobody came. So I decided that these horses are going to be mine. So I went on the wagon and I took the whip. You don't hit a horse, you just show it a whip. And then I took the reins and I pulled them right and left. And they started, I said, Vio, and they started going. And I went to the Theresienstadt, barracks. And after a day or so, I used to run to the farmers to get fruit, and they were so scared of refugees that whatever you wanted, you got. And so I got it, and there were poor people that were starving, and I brought them fruit and other things. And I was really like a macher, Pinchas, everybody knew Pinchas with his horses. And then a Czech official, they started having the Russians and the Czechs started administration. There was an epidemic of typhoid, so they actually were very good. They brought a hospital, a field hospital, and some of the nurses actually died there because they weren't they had no vaccination against typhoid, and I had typhoid already in Skaržisko, so I was immune to it. But he asked me, are these horses yours? And this wagon is, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, it's mine, 100% mine. So he said, would you like to work with us? So I said, well, what kind of work do you want me to do? He says, you'll be a contractor. We'll pay you 5,000 korunas, the Czech, money a month. So I said, fine. So for the next 3 months, I was a cartage contractor for the Czechs and the Russians, and whatever they needed to do, I was like a contractor. I was not even 13 years old yet, and yet I became a contractor, and I also went to the farms and got food, and a lot of the, refugees, a lot of the inmates of Theresienstadt were sick, so I used to bring them nice fruit and things like that, and so I kind of enjoyed myself there. I didn't think of the 5 years before. I was so involved, and these horses became my family. There were no stalls, so there was a building which was ruined. So I created a stall for them. I went and cut hay, and I was like, sometimes I used to often sleep instead of sleeping in my bed in the Hamburger Kaserne. I would go and sleep together with the horses, and they made me feel good because it was kind of reminded me of my father's farm, grandfather's farm, and I was a happy child. I mean, when you're a youngster, your brain hasn't been kind of spoiled to the extent. I mean, I never went to school. My school was the Holocaust, and basically what I try to do is make myself invisible, because the best way is to be invisible as far as the guards, as far as the kapos, as far as all these guys that could actually kill you any second, because they didn't think twice before taking out a revolver or a rifle and killing you or hitting you with a rifle butt and just doing you. So you try to make yourself invisible. You were like in a cocoon, and you made yourself completely, especially when you're a youngster, you're hoping maybe one day you come out like a beautiful butterfly, and you'll be free. But you didn't even think of it. You just were in a cocoon. You didn't think right, left. You lived in the second. Now that I am much older and much more conscious of whatever went through and what, and don't forget, one of the things that people don't realize, that maybe the first 10 years you don't think about it. You kind of try and organize, which I did. For the first 10 years, I didn't think. I had no nightmares, no nothing. It happened to me once when I was living with some cousins who survived the war in Paris in 1948 or 49, that I had a dream. I was being gassed and I started screaming, and then they calmed me down, and after that I forgot about it. And for the next 10 years, nothing. It was only 10 years later that my brain did something and I started having these nightmares. 80 years later, you become more sophisticated and you start thinking about something, and maybe it's 100% correct or maybe it's not. But the way I see it is, you were liberated, but you had nothing. You were a child, you were 12 going on 13, and you spent the last 5 years losing everybody, grandparents, great uncles, 150 members of your family or more, and you lost your immediate parents. You were in the same place where they were murdered, and then subsequently I went to see, I've been in Majdanek. I've been 20 times in Majdanek, and I've said prayers in the mountain of ashes, where unfortunately my parents and my twin sister is lying there, and I've been saying prayers for them. But the fact is, liberated how? Liberated what? I mean, you were never liberated, because the Shoah lives inside you. It doesn't disappear. And and you suffer right through. People don't realize that Holocaust survivors, they come to terms. They do things to be able to exist, and they have families. I have got children, I've got grandchildren, I have got great grandchildren. But the fact is that you can't run away from it. It's there, it's inside you, and it's there all the time. So, liberated how? Liberated from what? You just can't think in terms of, at that time, you didn't think you were liberated. In other words, you're liberated from immediate danger of being killed every second or every minute. But you weren't liberated from what happened to you. It became part of you, and it's inside you. And it doesn't matter how many times you educate it and you go to people, and I've been really all over the world talking to people. At the moment, I've got already people ask me to speak in Tennessee and Albany and of course in Toronto and everywhere else. And so today with Zoom, it's easy to do it far away. I mean, they asked me to come, and I can't travel at my age. I can't travel by aeroplanes and things like that, going to Albany or going to Tennessee. But the fact is that you don't get liberated. Liberation is it's an immediate thing that happened, that you were liberated from immediate, execution. But liberated from the Shoah, it doesn't exist. Um, my mother was a wonderful, beautiful lady. She was like a Scandinavian. We all had blonde, blue-eyed. In our family, we were all blonde and blue-eyed. And one of the reasons, that we could run away from Łódź to Warsaw go by train as Christians, because we were blonde and blue-eyed, and people didn't know whether we were German, Volksdeutsche, or whatever. But my mother was more than that. You know, when the uprising started, or before the uprising started, and we knew things were going to be really awry in 1943 in the Warsaw Ghetto, I had a cousin who actually, he married my cousin, my father's eldest sister's oldest daughter, and he was both a very capable individual, and he helped us a lot during the Warsaw Ghetto by getting documents and getting food and all kinds of things. And then his wife and his daughter, he had one daughter, Therese, and she, you know, his wife and the daughter, amongst us, we were, the Gutter family had a lot of blonde and blue eyes. So he sent her out to Christian friends of his. He could organize anything. And he stayed in the ghetto. And when the uprising started, he participated. And then while the ghetto uprising was still going on, he put on a black Macintosh, just like the Nazis, and he put one of these armbands with the Jewish police or Jewish collaborators, and he walked through the gate, and they, of course, assumed that he's one of these, informers, and they're going to kill him later, but at the moment he is helping them chase all the Jews out. And he just walked through, then slowly put out the armband and joined them, and he survived the war. And he came to my mother before the uprising, and he said, I've sent my wife and my daughter out. I can't send your husband and your son because they are circumcised, and it's very difficult to find a place for them. And anyway, your husband has got cello, he's not blonde, he's not blue-eyed, he's got a little beard, he's a Cossack, and he speaks Polish with an accent where you and your children speak pure Polish. So why don't you take, your daughter and go together and stay with my daughter, with my wife? And my mother absolutely said, where my husband and my son goes, I go. It doesn't matter if I'm going to be killed. I am not separating themselves. And she really uh, possibly sacrificed her life because she could have been saved by going to the Aryan side, but but it had absolutely no meanings for her. Her love for her children and for her husband was so great. She was a Hasidic wife, but to her, to lose her life, to be together with her wife, with her husband and children, she didn't even consider for 1 second. She said, Avrum, I'm sorry, you mean well, but I am not going to do anything like that.
I'm from Minnesota. We say "oofta" when we hear something like that. It hit you in the heart. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, and then right through, even when we were in the Umschlagplatz for about 36 hours or something like that, my mother could. My father had a sock with sugar, which he saved. He was like a giant. He was a simple Hasidic guy who worked as a winemaker, as you very well know, and he was very simple. He didn't. He wasn't I mean, Abraham Kroll was the guy that helped us. He was a giant. He was somebody who could organize himself. My father was a simple man, but the way he looked after, he saved us because he didn't trust the Nazis. So we were always hidden. That's why we lasted 3 weeks into the uprising in a bunker, because he always hid us. He wouldn't allow us, with all the papers that he got from Rav Kroll and everything, he wouldn't actually give the papers to anyone, because the Nazis they would tell you nonsense. They would say inspections of papers, and then they would say all these papers are not valid anymore. We've issued new papers. Let's say the papers that you had were white, so they would say now we issued yellow papers or green papers, and those people that have got those papers, they don't have to be relocated, as they used to use the word. Deported was not what they said. So, you know, my father and so my mother used to and then we were in a room where they wouldn't let us out for 36 hours or longer. I don't even remember exactly how long. We had to do everything. Women with pregnant women with babies with children, they wouldn't give you any food, they wouldn't give you any water, they wouldn't give you anything. But if you found some jewelry, they would give you water. So my father took off my mother's wedding ring, and he went to the door to the guard, and he gave him a big bottle of water. And then my mother gave us a bit of water. They never touched it. They just gave the children. And my father gave us a teaspoon of sugar, including when we were in the wagon already. He schlepped that bottle of water, which to him it was like gold, because he could give the children a little bit of water.
Oh, thank you. That's great. So if you could just say your name and where you were liberated from, so I can have that intro.
My name is Pinchas Gutter, and I was liberated in Theresienstadt on the 8th of May, 1945, by the Russian army.
And the same thing, my name is, and then maybe just say your mother, I am the son of, and your mother's name.
My name is Pinchas Gutter. I was liberated on the 8th of May 1945 by the Russian army. My mother's name was Chaya Gutter, but her maiden name was Silberstein. Her father was a farmer in Wielun, and he was also a Gerrer Chassid, very religious, and they had a arranged marriage, as you know, amongst the Hasidim. It was all arranged marriages, but my mother could only have when she gave birth to the twins, she couldn't have children afterwards. So she was very ill for about 6 months. She couldn't even feed us. So we had a nursemaid, that a woman that had her own child, And I remember a sepia photograph because I've got a photographic memory. There was a sepia photograph where this woman used to hold, of course, not when she was feeding us, but she was holding the two of us, my sister and I can see the picture of the two of us in her arms of this very buxom and lady who was nursing three children.